After a precarious election, Nigerians are preparing to enter into a storm of the unknown as they wait for the start of court proceedings. Meanwhile, the Nigerian politician has been brought into sharp relief as a malignant narcissist who has no conscience, little hesitation about abusing others, and who will stop at nothing to achieve his or her goals. They're described as selfish, manipulative, cold and calculating, and demanding lots of attention. Well, those aren't quite the words of my next guest, but that's the sense you get when you read Dakuku Peterside's scathing criticism of what he calls the Machiavellian Nigerian politician and his unbridled pursuit of electoral victories, buying up voters, compromising security personnel, and corrupting electoral officials. Never mind the fact that he himself is a politician and a ranking member of the ruling APC party, which many see as perpetuating the very electoral injustices that he criticizes. Nevertheless, his well-crafted article, published by This Day newspaper and titled "How Democracy Crumbles, the Nigerian Case," challenges all politicians to do more to repair the damage. So how far does his disappointment with the Nigerian politician stretch? Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the author, columnist, and former member of the House of Representatives, Dr. Dakuku Peterside, who is a chieftain of the ruling APC party and who, in a past incarnation, was the Director General of the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, or NIMASA. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, Charles. Thank you very much.
And that well-written article of yours, which I enjoyed immensely, by the way, published in This Day newspaper, you talked about how democracy crumbles and the reverberative impact of the general election, and about many people who came out of it disappointed in the structures and processes. Are you one of those who felt disappointed by it?
I can say, in some respect, if you follow the processes, there were a lot of things acts done by politicians and political leaders that does not in any way promote the spirit of democracy. You know, there are acts that promote democracy. And when you do those things that don't promote democracy, you're gradually killing democracy. And I can cite a lot of instances.
Well, I want to come to those instances first, but I want to gauge how far your disappointment stretches. Do you, for instance, believe that it was largely not free and fair on both the presidential and governorship levels, and that the results did not respect or reflect the will of the people?
Now, you must note that as of today, that is prejudicial. I can't comment on that because it's before the courts, but I can comment on the conduct of individuals and the conduct of institutions.
Well, the important thing is that the case hasn't actually started yet.
It's before the courts.
Yes, it is before the courts.
But you can't discuss what is before the courts.
Well, I mean, there are fine strictures about what you can and cannot. But
that's why I want to talk about I can talk about the conduct of individuals, the conduct of institutions, and talking about the conduct of individuals. You know, what people don't understand is that in electoral contest, you're not fighting your enemy, your competitors. So you don't destroy the country because you're competing. Nobody does that. And some of the unwritten rules about democracy is that there must be reasonable degree of tolerance. There must be forbearance. And if you follow the history of the evolution of democracy in America, George Washington, at the time he was president, there were no term limits. But he opted to do 2 terms. Even when he was not on to go further, of course, he realized that would not serve the best interest of America. So he placed the interest of America above his own personal interest. And there are many other political leaders who acted that way for the interest of the nation. But those who acted in opposite, those who placed their own interests above the general interest, in all cases, not only did democracy suffer, their countries ultimately pay the price for it. And so when our politicians act, our counsel is put the interest of the country above your own personal interest.
And you took particular aim at most of the political actors. I mean, you mentioned as much here, who you say were quite Machiavellian in their pursuit of electoral victories. They were buying up security personnel and voters, corrupting electoral officials, and they couldn't care less about the consequences on Nigeria's democracy. Does that include the president-elect Bola Tinubu and your party, the APC?
Well, if you talk about the president-elect, you know, I like to challenge anybody, you know, who has evidence that the president-elect directed anybody to compromise security agencies or the electoral body.
But you admit that those people acting on the auspices of the president-elect or to further his political ambition did compromise security
what I can
agencies.
say
I'm wondering the point you're making.
Is that there were compromises here and there. And you cannot attribute all cases to APC or PDP or Labour Party.
But you concede that the APC, I mean, you're in the APC, you concede that your party played a part in that compromising process.
No, not the party. If you say individuals, and these individuals cut across all political parties.
Individuals acting on behalf.
Whether the People's Democratic
But I'm talking
Party
about your party. I mean, we're talking about you're a member of the APC.
I am a member, proud member of the APC.
So what I'm trying to understand is whether these individuals, even if it wasn't the entire party, whether these individuals were acting on behalf of the APC.
No, that's the point I'm trying to make. You know, sometimes, you know, our people are territorial. And because they're territorial, in mindset, they try to do everything humanly possible to deliver the areas they consider their territory.
Right. And so they do extra legal things.
Extra legal things.
In the process of doing.
Just like I said, it cuts across various political parties. And they don't know, as they do that, they will begin to weaken the institutions of democracy. They begin to make people lose trust in democracy. And indeed, there are consequences.
Absolutely. And on the state level, you cited your own state, Rivers, as an example of what you called an electoral heist, which you say took place in the presence of security agents.
During and after.
Right. In the presence of security agents and INEC officials. So in effect, the point is that because I mean the PDP runs Rivers State.
Very true.
But the point I seem to glean from what you're saying is that in effect those officials of the security agents and officials were prepared to obey state officials and not their own commander-in-chief, who gave very clear orders that this election must be conducted above board, international standards, all the rest of it.
Now you must also understand how environment influences people, how the political system works. You need to have a deeper understanding of how the system works. And this is hypothetical. For some reasons, I won't talk about life examples. Hypothetical. Very often, if you send a commissioner of police to a state, and the state government provides him all the logistics he needs, host him to dinner, and share with him what he thinks are the challenges in the state. Provide all the logistics he needs, make him comfortable, and ultimately share with him his interest. The tendency is that he will likely, unless he's coming from Abuja with a specific instruction from the commander-in-chief, and that will not happen. You cannot call 36 commissioners of police and begin to give them specific instructions per state. It's most unlikely, not that it cannot happen. And so when the governor gives you personal attention, makes commitments, you're most likely to listen to him.
Yeah, but to what extent? Because I mean, the issue is that you have to wonder what the ethics of these people is.
And that is the issue.
Yeah, because now, I mean, you wonder why just, maybe you give someone dinner or whatever, but they then go so far as to allow things which are clearly violations of the rules to happen in their presence.
And of course, it happens all the time. And thank God you cited the case of Rivers. It started with a number of executive orders signed by the governor of Rivers, which made it impossible for the opposition to campaign in any part of the state. I'm sure you are aware that because of his own personal disagreement with the PDP, they couldn't campaign in Rivers. I'm sure you are aware of that. Now, the local APC just couldn't campaign in most places. In my own village in particular, in my local government, they made it almost impossible. All sorts of executive orders that were absolutely illegal. And you know that challenging these illegal executive orders through the court process can take you forever because of the way our judicial system runs. He got away with that. Now, after the elections, I don't want to talk about things that happened during the elections. After the elections, our governorship candidate led members of the party, got necessary court injunction and all of secured necessary.
That's Tonya Cole.
Tonya Cole.
Right.
Tried to obtain documents with which elections were conducted, certified true copies, and they just wouldn't allow him. Now, of course, they brought what seemed, or what they say,
yeah, but you're talking about the governorship elections in Rivers, not the presidential elections. Right, okay.
So they brought all sorts of characters, armed men, armed women, and these guys are carrying arms illegally. They are not security agents and all of that, and they were bearing these arms in the presence of security agents, and they did nothing for days. They did nothing about it, absolutely nothing about it. And so they begin to lay the foundation, of the demise of democracy. When people lose trust, this whole concept about democracy is about exchange of ideas, competition for whose idea will be more acceptable. It's about the rule of law. It's about transparency. It's about accountability. Now, those are the pillars, on which you build democracy. If those pillars begin to crumble, then you've contributed to the demise of democracy. It's only a matter of time. The same way democracy grows, organically. That's why they destroy democracy through the same organic process.
But it's not just...
And it's usually gradual.
Right, but it's not just on the state level. I mean, a lot of people will agree with your analysis, but they would say that it goes beyond Rivers State, and many of them believe that Mr. Tinubu, who is the candidate of your party, is arriving into office with what I think it was Akin Oshuntokun of the Labour Party described as the liability and illegitimacy of having not won a free and fair election.
Now, you see, Aki is partisan. Is that correct?
Well, obviously.
That's the general of the Labour Party. Is that correct?
He is a member of the Labour Party. What I mean by, I don't mean he's obviously partisan. I mean he's a member of the Labour Party.
The natural inference to draw is that he will not give you an objective analysis of the situation. Is that correct?
No, but what I'm asking you...
Can he give you an objective assessment of the situation?
But what I'm asking you is a variance of your article. I am simply focusing most of my questions on the article that you wrote for this newspaper. I simply mentioned Akin Oshuntokun because I borrowed his words.
Okay.
But I am saying to you, based on your assessment, which I thought was a very good assessment, by the way, excellent article, do you believe that Mr. Tinubu is arriving into office with the yoke of illegitimacy?
I don't believe it.
Right. So you're selective in your Well, obviously you are.
No, absolutely not.
Right. And there are, of course, as you mentioned at the outset, legal challenges pending in court, including Rivers State. And you talked about these same bad politicians compromising judges.
Not just judges, institutions.
Yeah, no, I know, but you mentioned, I'm referring specifically to who are really... I mean, judges are the last hope for democracy.
Very true.
So obviously, we're all waiting to see if they've been captured in the court cases that are ongoing, as I'm sure you are. And if they've been captured and consequently fail to deliver justice, will that signal for you, as you mentioned in your article, a descent into autocracy and anarchy in this country?
No, it would be disheartening if judicial system fails ultimately. You know, there are some guardrails of democracy. And when the guardrails and the gatekeepers fail, then democracy is beginning to fail, and it's only a matter of time. And
agreed.
Foremost among the guardrails of democracy is the judiciary. If other institutions are compromised, one that should still be the conscience of the nation is the judiciary. The next is the media. And so if they abdicate in the execution of their role, then there's no hope. And I believe that they have a burden to prove not just their independence, that they still remain the hope of the common man.
So for the moment, you're prepared to give the judges the benefit of the doubt.
Absolutely.
You're not convinced already that a fair verdict will not emerge from the
No,
courts.
I am convinced that a fair verdict will emerge.
Okay.
However, they also understand that they are the focus today. You know, democracy is a process. And at one end of it is the judicial process. You know, so they know that the nation, the international community, our people, looks up to them to not only save democracy, to advance democracy. So they've got a moral burden.
Absolutely. And you talked about how the perpetrators of a lot of the bad things you were talking about have gone without punishment. And you found that particularly odious.
That's most unfortunate. You know, everywhere society descends to anarchy, it starts with negation or disobedience
impunity.
Or neglect, impunity of the rule of law.
Yeah.
Most cases, you know, the impunity leads to anarchy, chaos. And where there are no consequences, people are incentivized to behave badly. So if you are a criminal, you steal, you're caught, and there are no consequences, of course you elevate your act to the next level. And so when people disobey laws and they suffer no consequences, they are encouraged, they are incentivized to continue on that path. And that's what I see playing out. And that's what is worrisome. In many instances, you know, people, let me not go to the extreme, where I say people put electoral personnel under gunpoint, force them to write results, and at best they say INEC can review. And those persons who did that are not facing prosecution.
But you know, there are people who would say that, I mean, your party has ruled this country for the last 8 years. It's got another...
almost 8 years.
It's got another 4 years coming up. And why didn't you do anything about this? You're a member of
I've
the
been
APC.
consistent.
I'm not talking about you in particular.
Good.
I'm talking about you as a party. I mean, what would be the justification for someone who's taken the moral high ground, like yourself, to remain and be part of a party that clearly isn't doing the thing? Because it had the power to do it. It had the power to make the change, and it hasn't made that change.
Yeah, what I can say is that it cannot reform a system from outside. It reforms a system from inside. So in all political parties, I mean everywhere in the world, there are different tendencies within the political party. And so I belong to that tendency that believes that we can reform the system and make it a platform that can genuinely advance the interest of Nigerian people.
But your voice is in the minority.
No, it's a matter of time.
Because clearly we haven't seen that change, have we?
No, it's a matter of time. And what I want to challenge anybody is that watch the difference from now going forward.
Well, that's an interesting thing, having spent 8 years in office. There's
always a turning point. You know, one thing you can say about change is that when you are at the point of inertia, it's usually very difficult to move. You need some force. And I can tell you that the 2023 election is a compelling force that will move not just the party, but almost all the political parties to go in a different direction.
Well, let's hope you're right.
No, I'm absolutely right. If you watch the pattern, the trend of the 2023 elections, the parties have all woken up. They now know that the people can no longer be taken for granted. They now know that Nigerians desire not just good governance, they desire to go in a different direction. It's self-evident.
Okay, well, as I said, let's hope you're right. But I want to thank you very much indeed. And I also want to commend you. I would recommend that article for people to read. I think it's a real lesson in democracy. And Dr. Dakuku Peterside is an author, columnist, former member of the House of Representatives, a chieftain of the ruling APC party, and a former Director General of the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, NIMASA. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.